The wine glass my mother refilled for him was the third one that night, and nobody at the table seemed to notice except me. I had been quiet through most of dinner. That was not unusual. In my family, quiet was just the role I had always been assigned without anyone asking if I wanted it. My younger brother had always been the one who filled the room, louder, funnier, the kind of person who could walk into a party and immediately become the center of it. I was the one who showed up on time, helped with the dishes, and drove home alone. His girlfriend had been around for about 4 months. I want to be fair here. I tried, genuinely, to like her from the beginning. She was beautiful in that specific way that made people assume she was also kind. She laughed easily. She touched my brother's arm constantly, small possessive gestures that he seemed to love. My parents adored her immediately, the way parents sometimes adore the partners of their favorite children, like they are collecting evidence that everything turned out right. Her name was Claudia. It was a Sunday dinner at my parents' house in Oakville, the kind my mother still insists on every few weeks. The big oval table, the good dishes, the way everyone acts slightly more formal than we actually are with each other. My boyfriend at the time had a work conflict and couldn't make it, so it was just me, alone, sitting across from my brother and Claudia and whatever version of my family this dinner was going to produce. It started small. It always starts small. We were talking about work. My brother had recently been promoted at the tech company he worked for, and my parents were still riding that wave of pride, bringing it up at any opportunity. I was genuinely happy for him. I want to say that clearly, because the rest of the story might make it sound like I wasn't, and that would not be accurate. I was happy for him. I just was not particularly interested in the 40-minute retelling of his title change. I mentioned that I had taken on a new file at work. I work as a forensic accountant at a mid-sized firm in Toronto. It is, I will admit, not a job that makes people lean forward at dinner tables. But I said it. Mentioned a complicated case, said it had been an interesting few months. Claudia tilted her head. Wait, she said, the way people say it when they already know what they're about to say and are just building a runway. You're an accountant. Like, you just do taxes? I explained that forensic accounting was different, that it involved financial investigations, fraud detection, litigation support. She laughed. Not meanly, exactly. Just lightly, the way someone laughs when they find something slightly absurd. That sounds exhausting, she said. All those spreadsheets. She glanced at my brother and he smiled, and I watched my mother smile too. Slightly, the way parents sometimes smile when they are trying to smooth something over by pretending it was not what it clearly was. I let it go. I picked up my fork. The pasta was good, but Claudia was not finished. Over the next hour, slowly, the dinner became something else. She mentioned her own career multiple times. She worked in commercial real estate, and she was good at it, and she wanted everyone to know both of those things. She talked about a deal she had recently closed, a commercial property in Mississauga, the commission, the square footage, the clients she had impressed. My parents asked follow-up questions. My brother beamed. At some point, she turned to me again. Do you ever think about doing something more? I don't know, dynamic, she asked. Like, you seem smart. You could probably do a lot more than just crunch numbers all day. I looked at her. I like my work, I said. Oh, totally, I just mean. She waved her hand. Doesn't it feel a little invisible? Nobody calls their accountant exciting. My brother laughed at that one. Not a cruel laugh, more like the reflex laugh of someone who does not realize the joke is at his sister's expense. My father chuckled. My mother said, Claudia, in a tone that managed to be both a mild correction and a laugh at the same time. I was the only person at the table who was not smiling. The feeling that settled in my chest then was familiar. It was the particular loneliness of being in a room full of people who love you and still finding yourself completely alone in it. I had felt it before, at other dinners, in other years, but it had never quite come from a direction like this. From someone who had known me for 4 months and had just been handed the microphone by everyone I grew up with. I put my fork down. I picked up my water glass. I did not say anything. Claudia took that as confirmation that she had won something. She became slightly bolder after that. She mentioned twice that forensic accounting was basically just following a paper trail, that her cousin had been an auditor and found it soul-crushing, that she admired people who could tolerate repetitive work. Every comment was delivered with that same light, airy tone, not hostile, just vaguely condescending, the kind of tone that is specifically designed to make the other person seem oversensitive if they object to it. My mother refilled everyone's wine. My brother put his arm around Claudia's shoulder. My father started talking about the Jays game. I excused myself to use the washroom. I stood in my parents' upstairs bathroom for a moment, looking at myself in the mirror, and I made a decision. Not an angry decision. I want to be clear about that. It was actually a very calm one. I had been carrying something in the back of my mind for about 3 weeks, something I had come across in the course of my work that I had not known what to do with. I had gone back and forth about whether it was my business. I had told myself it wasn't. I had almost convinced myself to leave it alone entirely. Standing in that bathroom, listening to the muffled sound of laughter from downstairs, I decided I was done leaving things alone. I went back down to dinner. The conversation had moved on. Claudia was talking about a property she had her eye on, something she was hoping to invest in personally, a condo development near Hamilton. She was explaining the financing structure to my parents, who were listening with the particular attentive warmth they reserved for people they had already decided they liked. The pre-construction market is tricky right now, she was saying, but if you know what you're doing, the ROI is still really strong. You just have to know the right people. I waited until she had finished her thought. What firm handles your deals? I asked. I kept my voice casual. She told me. And your license is registered under your full legal name? She looked at me. Something flickered in her eyes. Of course, she said. Why? Just curious, I said. I've come across that firm recently, in a professional context. The table went quiet in the particular way that tables go quiet when something has shifted, and nobody is quite sure yet what shifted. What does that mean? My brother asked. I looked at him. I had thought about this moment in the bathroom upstairs, and I had decided that I owed it to him to be direct, not dramatic, not cruel, just direct. 3 weeks ago, I said, I was reviewing documentation on a file that involved a complaint to RECO, the Real Estate Council of Ontario. The complaint was about a licensed agent who had failed to disclose a material fact to a buyer. Specifically, a known foundation issue on a residential property in Burlington that the listing agent had received a report about and did not pass on. I paused. I recognized the name on the file. The silence was total. Claudia set down her wineglass. That complaint was dismissed, she said. It was withdrawn, I said, by the buyer after a settlement. That's different from being dismissed. I looked at her. I also want to be honest. I'm not certain the file I saw is the only one. My brother was staring at me. You're lying, Claudia said. Her voice had changed. The lightness was completely gone. I have no reason to lie, I said. Why didn't you say anything sooner? My brother asked. Because I wasn't sure it was my place, I said. And then tonight, I decided it was. My mother said my name in a tone I had not heard since I was a teenager. You're embarrassing yourself, Claudia said. You're jealous, and you're trying to make me look bad in front of your family because you can't stand that someone else is the center of attention for once. I looked at her for a long moment. You called me invisible tonight, I said. You said nobody finds accountants exciting. You asked me if I'd ever considered doing something more dynamic. I kept my voice even. I want you to know that I did not take any of that personally. I genuinely didn't. But I also want you to understand that invisible and unaware are not the same thing. I reached into my bag, which was on the chair beside me, and I set my phone on the table. On the screen was a screenshot, a summary document I had prepared, not showing anything confidential from my file, just publicly available information, the RICO complaint number, the case status, a property address in Burlington. Enough to verify. Enough to be real. You can look that up yourself, I said to my brother. All of it is searchable. He picked up my phone. His face changed as he read it. Claudia stood up. I want to tell you that she said something. that there was a dramatic confrontation, a confession, a moment that you could write a clean ending around. But what actually happened was quieter than that. She said something under her breath that I did not catch, picked up her jacket from the back of her chair, and walked to the front hallway. The door closed behind her with a sound that was not a slam. It was actually softer than that, which somehow felt worse. My brother sat there for a moment, then he got up and followed her. I looked at my parents. My mother was staring at the tablecloth. My father was holding his wineglass without drinking from it. "Did you have to do that here?" my mother said finally. I thought about that question. I thought about the version of the evening where I had stayed quiet again, gone home, sent a careful text to my brother in the morning. Softer, more apologetic, easier to dismiss. I thought about the 47 other times in my life I had calibrated myself smaller so that family dinners could stay comfortable. "Yes," I said. "I think here was exactly right." I helped my mother clear the table. We did not talk much. I washed the pasta pot because it is the kind of pot that is better washed by hand. And she stood beside me drying dishes, and eventually she said quietly, "I didn't know she was like that." I didn't answer. I was not sure what I would have said. My brother called me 2 days later. The conversation was long and uncomfortable and honest, in the way that conversations between siblings can only be once you have stopped pretending. He told me he had looked everything up. He told me he had talked to Claudia. He told me she had not, in fact, been entirely straightforward with him about the Burlington situation, or about a few other things. He did not thank me, not in those words. But toward the end of the call, after a silence, he said, "How did you even know to look?" "I didn't look," I said. "I just paid attention." He didn't say anything for a moment. "She told me you were jealous of her," he said. "At the dinner. After?" "I know," I said. "Were you—" I thought about that honestly. About the way she had talked about her commission, and her clients, and her ROI. About the way the table had leaned toward her. "No," I said. "I was bored." He laughed at that. It was the first real laugh of the conversation, and it loosened something between us that I had not realized was tight. They broke up 6 weeks later. I do not know the full reasons, and I did not ask. My brother is the kind of person who processes things internally, who comes to conclusions slowly and then arrives at them completely. He told me on a Wednesday evening in a short text, "It's done. Let's get dinner soon." I sent back a thumbs up and then immediately deleted it and sent a proper response because I am 31 years old and a thumbs up is not the reply your brother needs after a breakup. We got dinner the following Friday. Sushi on King Street. He talked about work, about a trip he was thinking about taking, about a podcast he had been listening to. We did not talk about Claudia much. Near the end of the meal, he said, "I think I wanted her to be something she wasn't." And I said, "I know." And he said, "You knew earlier than I did." And I said, "That's what I do for a living." He smiled. "Forensic accounting." "Following a paper trail," I said. He looked at me for a second. "She was wrong about you," he said. I should have said that at the table. I shrugged. "It doesn't matter." "It does," he said. I just didn't. I let that sit. There is something I have been thinking about since that dinner, something that has taken me a while to put into words. There is a particular kind of invisibility that gets assigned to people who are good at quiet work. People who show up without fanfare, who do things carefully and correctly, who are not loud about what they know. Families do it. Workplaces do it. Dinner tables do it. They look at the person who is not performing and assume there is nothing to see. I spent a long time accepting that role. I told myself it was fine. I told myself I did not need the center of the table, that I was above caring about things like that being underestimated was actually useful. Some of that was true, but some of it was just a story I told myself so I would not have to feel how much it cost me every time. What I know now is this: being quiet is not the same as being absent. Being careful is not the same as being small. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do in a room full of people who have decided they already know what you are is to simply open your bag and put something true on the table. Let them figure out the rest. I have thought about that dinner table a lot since then. Not the loud part of it, not Claudia's voice or my mother's laugh or the particular way my brother's arm settled around her shoulders like a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence I was not supposed to finish. What I keep coming back to is the quiet part. The moment after I put that screenshot on the table and the room went completely still. There's a version of that evening where I said nothing, where I went home, sent a careful text, softened everything until it was easy to ignore. I had done that before, more times than I want to count, and what it had bought me was the comfort of being liked without ever being known. What happened with Claudia did not come out of nowhere. She spent an entire dinner telling me, in the politest possible way, that I was not worth taking seriously. And my family, the people who had known me my whole life, handed her the room to do it. That is not something that happens in a vacuum. It happens when someone has been quiet long enough that the people around them stop wondering what they are actually thinking. I do not blame them entirely. I had trained them, I had made it easy. But here is what I have learned about cause and effect, the kind that does not require anything mystical to explain. The choices we make about who we are in a room have consequences. Claudia made a choice to be careless with the truth, about a property in Burlington, about other things, and that carelessness accumulated. It did not disappear because she was charming. It did not disappear because the complaint was withdrawn. It sat there in the record, waiting. And my choice to finally stop editing myself had consequences too. Not punishment, not karma in any cosmic sense. Just the straightforward result of one true thing placed on a table in front of people who could not unsee it. What I wish I had understood earlier is that integrity is not a private matter. It is not enough to be honest in your own head, to know the right thing and hold it quietly while someone else performs a version of events that suits them better. Integrity is something you have to be willing to act on, even when the room is not with you, even when your mother is looking at the tablecloth and your brother has gone after the person you just named. That is the hard part. Not knowing what is right, knowing, and then doing it anyway, in the actual room, at the actual table, with your actual family watching. I think about my brother too. He got there eventually. Slowly, the way he does things. It would have been easier, I think, if someone in that room had said something sooner, not to be cruel, but because he deserved better than to build something real with a person who was not being straight with him. Staying quiet to keep the peace is not kindness. Sometimes it is just the more comfortable form of letting someone down. What I carried out of that dinner was something I had not expected to find there. The understanding that being careful and being invisible are not the same, but they can become the same if you are not paying attention. The work I do, following paper trails, reading documents that other people assume no one will read, taught me that details matter, that patterns exist whether or not anyone is looking for them, that things tend to surface eventually. That is true outside of work too. What you do when no one is grading you, who you are when the room is not paying attention, whether you choose honesty when silence would be so much easier, that accumulates. It becomes the kind of person you are, and one day, without planning for it, you will reach into your bag at a dinner table in Oakville, and everything you have been quietly building will be right there in your hand.